Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, I'm sharing a Shaped Book Nook Light Up card. I absolutely love this Stitched Study Nook Stitching Die of the Month from Spellbinders, and I've already made one light up card with it, but wanted to create another one that was shaped, that had a different layout and a different color scheme. I'm also including the 3D embossing folder of the month. It's called Stacked Stories. Here's the first card that I created with that stitching die of the month. And in that same video, I also do something else with the Stacked Stories 3D embossing folder. So I'll link to that video at the end if you want to watch it and find more ideas for both of these. I have all of my pieces cut and ready to go, or most of them ready to go for my card. I always love to prep all my die cuts ahead of time, so that when it comes time to putting my card together, it's really, really easy to do. To do the light up mechanism, I'm using these One Light lights. They are so easy to use. They come with the batteries. You just put them in, and then there's a button to press to make that light up. So I have that ready to go, put to the side. And you can see that the first time I did it, I actually did it upside down. It makes it really easy to fix that by pushing the battery out and flipping it right over. Now, to add a little bit of extra texture to my card, for my stitching pieces or my stitched armchair, I'm using some velvet cardstock. It's actually got an adhesive back to it. So to give it a little bit more stability, I put it on some cardstock before die cutting it. I also did the outline die, which is some plain cardstock. Once I'm done my stitching, I like to glue a plain die cut piece of cardstock to the back of it, just to enclose all that stitching. It also makes it a lot easier when you're gluing it to a card, because you're just gluing stitch or cardstock down rather than gluing the stitched part down. For a little bit of extra texture, I'm using some metallic cardstocks from the Rose Gold Treasured Cardstock pack. So I'm using the pearl finish for that lamp. I also use it for the rug as well as some of the book accents. And then I'm also using the matte Rose Gold cardstock for some of the accents as well. So some of the books, the pot for the plant, as well as the fringe and stand for my lamp. Now, when it comes to stitching my die cuts, I have a bunch of different floss. I got this pack that comes from Spellbinders. It's got 36 of the most popular colors. I chose one from there. I ended up doing the same color on both the lamp as well as the chair. It's number 435. I take as much floss as I think I'm going to need, and I tend to use 2 strands when I'm doing my stitching. You could use a little bit more if you want your stitching to be a little bit more dimensional and have a little bit more weight to it, or have it be a little bit thicker. For me, 2 strands seems to be what I like, so that's what I tend to do. To start off my stitching, I start from going from the back to the front and use a little piece of Best Ever Craft tape to tape my floss down so that it's nice and secure. I know some people like to use 1 strand of floss so that there's a loop at the end and use that as a mechanism to secure their floss. I just prefer this way. It works for me. There's not really a right or wrong way to do it. It's just whatever works best for you. And I like knowing that it's secure in place and I don't have to worry about there being a tail that could possibly pull out. I also don't have to worry about it possibly flipping and going towards the outside of my cardstock and seeing that tail of that thread out of there. Stitching dies are really, really easy to use. When you die cut them, they put an indent sharing exactly where they intend for that stitching to go. Now you can get creative and add more to it or change the stitching up. You have a lot of creative control with that. But if you're new to it, it's really nice to have those lines right in there so you know that how they intended for it to be stitched. And I typically, when I start off, I will do how they intended first, and then if I want, I will go and get creative after that. But it's always nice to have a little bit of a guide, so there's very little trying to figure it out on your own. Once I've done the back of my chair there, I'm ready to do the stitching on the bottom. I don't cut my floss in between. I just go from the last place I stitched on the top to the bottom part and do the stitching there. For the stitching there, I just go up one hole, down the other, and then up the next one. So it's, again, really, really easy. Once I'm done all my stitching, I take another piece of that Best Ever Craft tape, tape that end of the floss down and secure it, and then use my detail scissors to cut it off. Now here is where I like to glue it onto that solid cardstock piece. And I usually typically just pick a cardstock scrap to die cut to put behind there. Usually similar color to what I'm stitching, or else I'll just use white. You will see the edges of the cardstock, which is why I will typically choose a similar color to it. But again, the purpose of this for me is to enclose all that stitching to make sure that it's all enclosed in there, and it makes it a lot easier when I'm gluing pieces down. I use some sewing clips to hold those pieces together while they're drying. That way I'm not sitting there holding them. You can hold them if you want, but it's really easy to just use some clips, some clothesline clips, anything that will hold two things together, just to make sure that you can work on something else. I'm going to do the same method when it comes to the lamp. I start off going from the back to the front. I use a little piece of Best Ever Craft tape to secure that end of the floss. And then once I'm done stitching, I'm going to repeat that same process. And then once I'm done stitching as well, I will go and glue this to another solid cardstock die cut to make sure that all of that is enclosed. And when I go to glue things together, I am only gluing cardstock to cardstock. This piece here, I'm actually going to put it on some foam pop dots because I want there to be a little bit of dimension for that light that I'm putting behind it to show through. So here I just did my extra die cut with some white cardstock. Again, it doesn't really matter. You will see just the edges of it, but because that pearl is so light, I think the white works perfectly. So I'm going to put those clips on there, let that dry, and while I'm letting that dry, I'm just going to assemble some of my die cuts to get them ready to go on my card. So that first one there is all dried and ready to go. I can glue the bottom part onto that chair with the legs there. Anytime I glue things together, I have a large acrylic block that I typically use to put on top of the pieces that are drying. That way, again, just the same as using those sewing clips, it makes sure that everything's nice and flat for drying, and it frees up my hands for working on other things. I never like sitting and waiting for things to dry, but I do really like using liquid glue because it gives you some wiggle room, especially when you're assembling die cuts. It's nice to be able to have that wiggle room and you can place them exactly how you want them, but it's not fun to sit there and hold them while that dries. So that acrylic block comes in really handy. I always have it and I use it for pretty much every project that I'm assembling die cuts. So for the books from this die set, I have them die cut in black, some of that matte rose gold cardstock, as well as some of the pearl rose gold cardstock. I have them stacked together, and I'm going to use that as kind of a coffee table. It's going to be a stacked book coffee table for my lamp to sit on. When I used this die set for my first card, I created a hanging lamp so it was hanging from the ceiling. This time I want to use that same die cut that you can hang it with and use that as a lamp stand, and it worked out perfectly. It looks like either one, so I love the fact that you can intermix it. For the rest of my die cuts, just like the rest, or just like my most of my projects, I have them already die cut. I always die cut all of my pieces and store them in one of my craft stacks. It makes it really, really easy to have everything together, ready to go, and you know you're not going to start losing any die cuts. So I use those for pretty much every project. They come in so handy. And once my die cuts are assembled, I put them right back into that craft stacks, put them to the side while I'm working on something else, and that way I know that all of my die cuts are together and they aren't going to move on me. For the background of my card, because I wanted this to be like a reading nook, a book nook, I thought using the stacked stories embossing folder would create a really neat, unique look that looked kind of like shelves from a library. Now, obviously, it's not shelves with a lot of books on them because this entire embossing folder are large book spines, but it does create some fun texture to the back. And I think to me, it looks like a reading nook or a reading corner. So it created the look that I wanted with it. So I have those pieces die cut out of some Acorn Cardstock. I'm using the Essential Arches die set for that arched shape, as well as for my card base. I used the largest one for my solid background that I embossed. I also use that same one for the two white pieces that I'm going to be using for my card base. For this arch outline here, or arch frame, I used the largest of the arch dies and then the third largest to get a little bit thicker of an edge to it. I wanted it to look a little bit like an arched doorway. Now, if you want that arched doorway to be kind of forward and a little bit more in the foreground than your lamp, you will want to die cut that a couple times. I only did it once on this card, and once the card was done, I really like how it looks. However, because I put foam pop dots on that lamp, as well as the fact that the chair is a couple pieces of cardstock plus one of those pieces is velvet cardstock. My lamp as well as my chair are a little bit more forward than that frame. It just really depends on the look that you're going for. So once I had my background embossed, I used some walnut stain distress ink to do some inking on it. And then I used the Lisa Horton Copper Pot pad to just lightly rub on it to give that some metallic accents that are going to coordinate beautifully with that rose gold cardstock as well as that rose pearl cardstock. So with that done, I did let that dry a little bit off screen. And then I'm just kind of placing my die cuts where I want them to go. The one thing I am keeping in mind though is that I have that frame around there, and I don't want that frame impacted by my lamp. Or my chair. So as I'm placing my die cuts, I'm making sure that they are just inside where that frame is going to go. I want to be able to see those die cuts, but I don't want that frame around there to be lumpy or bumpy. And by going over top of other die cuts, it would be. So I'm trying to keep that frame as flat as possible. Once I have placed all my pieces where I think they're going to go really, really well, and I'm happy with that layout, I'm ready to start gluing my pieces down. So as I'm gluing them down, once again, I'm using that Barely Art craft glue in my fine tip bottle. It's going to give me the freedom to move and shimmy things as I work. You can see as I'm putting the books down to stack my little table here, I changed my mind on the stacking. I decided to flip a few of them around. And in the end, I actually take a couple of them out because I feel that my table is just a little bit too high. I'm also trying to not have the same texture right beside each other. So I'm trying not to have a bunch of the matte copper or matte rose gold books right beside each other. I'm trying not to have the pearl rose gold books right beside each other. So I'm trying to vary which ones are right beside each other. Once I have that all done, I will put my acrylic block on top of there and just let that dry for a few minutes to make sure that that glue is nice and secure before I start to work on my lighting mechanism for my card. I want to make sure that I have all of my die cuts in place so that I know exactly where to put that. I don't want to put that in an area first and then start stacking things or placing things and realize that it's in the wrong spot. So that's why I'm doing all of this stuff first to make sure that when I do place it, it's going to be in the right spot for the look that I'm going for. I also glued down the stand for my lamp because I want to make sure that I can position my light exactly where I want it. So in order to do that, I position the button for my lamp exactly where I want that to go on my lamp stand. And then I position that mechanism to figure out where that light is going to be and then use a pencil to just mark it. For cutting the hole for that light, I just use my Crop-A-Dial tool. It has a hole punch on either side. You could do two different sizes. I do the larger of the two. If you don't have one of these, another option would be to use a die. However, if you're going to use a die, it's going to flatten your embossed background. So it would actually be better to say use an X-Acto knife with mat to just hand cut, say, a square or an opening for that light before gluing it to the back of your card. That way you can control exactly where that light is going to be or where that opening is going to be, but you know that you won't crush or flatten any of your embossed background. So with that light in place, and I put it in place with some Suquang tape, I'm just using 1/4 inch just in order to secure that in where exactly where I want it, to make sure that that light is not going to shift on me. In order to mark where the button is, I used a smoky topaz gem and just put that up the base of the lamp. It coordinates beautifully with the color scheme here, but it's something a little bit different. And what I would do would be put a little post-it note on the inside of the card if someone didn't get it, or if you're mailing it to someone so you're not going to actually be there. I put a little post-it note saying press the gem on the front of the card or whatever, just so that they understand that something happens if you press it. For my last card, I just punched a red circle with that Crop-A-Dial and glued that in place, and that worked well as well. This, I just thought it worked better with the color scheme by doing that little gem there. But if you're not going to hand card to someone, you can understand how it might not be something that they would really understand. So I wanted to make sure it was something that wouldn't get missed. So a little post-it note on the inside would be a perfect way to just let them know that something happens when you do that. Now that mechanism for that light, because it has that battery on it, it has some dimension to it. So in order to accommodate for that dimension, I have some foam pop dots here that I'm going to put on the back of this card here. Really, I would prefer some foam tape, but all of the foam tapes that I have are fairly thin, so they're not going to allow enough dimension. So my foam pop dots were just a quicker way to do it because they allowed for that dimension. However, full disclosure, it's not, for me, it's not my favorite look from the side of the card, seeing the foam pop dots. I'd rather see some foam tape. Now, on my last video where I did that light up card, someone asked how you would change the battery for the light because I had completely enclosed it. For me, my thought is that I wouldn't. And the reason being is because it's totally enclosed, but because that light only goes on when you press that mechanism, I think that battery is going to last a really long time. If it's something that concerns you, what I would do would be to, say, cut a door in the back where that mechanism is so that you could access that battery to change it. But it's not something that I am personally that worried about. So with the front of my card done, I've glued it to one of my arched pieces. I took my scoreboard and scored about an inch below the top of the arch, made sure to fold it back and forth to make sure that I have a nice hinge there. And then I put some glue on the top of that piece there to glue that hinge to the front of my card. And this way I have a shaped card that is an absolutely adorable book nook that is just something so fun to give to someone. I'm actually going to send this to my daughter. She absolutely loves reading, and I sent her a little video of it, and she just fell in love with the card, so I'm going to send it to her. That last step there that I did was add some of that copper pot ink pad, and I just rubbed it around the arch just to give it a little bit more of a metallic shine. The walnut stain distress that I had put there, it just added a little bit darkness to it, but it didn't really do anything to it for it, in my opinion. So by adding that copper pot ink there, it just gives it something that catches the light, and I liked it much better. Now, I didn't add a sentiment on the inside of this card because I didn't have one that I loved for it. I think it would work well to do something that has something to do with reading, that has something to do with books, or has something to do with my happy place or something like that. But I left it blank so it could be, you could just write something in there if you wanted, but that's where I would put a sentiment if you wanted a sentiment for this card. And even without a stamp sentiment, there's a lot of room to write a personal message in there. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate all the time that you spend with me. I hope you have a fantastic day.